In today's passage verse 18, it says, "We know that anyone born of God does not continue to sin. The one who was born of God keeps them safe, and the evil one cannot harm them." It says that the evil one is rampant in the world. But if God protects him, the evil one cannot even touch him. We are those who belong to God, and God protects us. 1 John chapter 5:19, and we know that we belong to God. And the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. It says that there are two kinds of people in the world. The first kind of people are those who belong to God. The second kind of people are those who do not belong to God. We are those who belong to God and are protected by God. 1 John chapter 5:19 says, "We know that we are children of God, and that the whole world is under the control of the evil one." To those who belong to God and those who belong to the evil one. If you are not belonging to God, you are belonging to the devil, the evil one. Many people have lived their entire lives thinking that they belong to the church, but when they stand before the final judgment seat, they are surprised to discover their true affiliation. Therefore, the Lord said, Matthew 7:13-14, "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction. And many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life. And only a few find it." There are many people who say they believe in the Lord, but he says that not many are truly saved. This is a frightening statement. Luke 1:3-23-24. Someone asked him, "Lord, are only a few people going to be saved?" He said to them, "Make every effort to enter through the narrow door, because many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able to. It is said that the door leading to destruction is wide, and the road is broad, and many enter through it. However, it is said that the door leading to life is narrow, and the road is narrow, and few seek it. Therefore, if you do not take the right path of faith, you may be greatly disappointed forever. The only time we have a chance is while we are in this world. We must move forward with right faith while we are in this world. God-centered faith that is not centered on the Word, but on people or the world is a false faith that leads to the broad way of the world. Such people will eventually find that the gates of heaven will close and never open again. Luke chapter 13:25. Once the owner of the house gets up and closes the door, you will stand outside, knocking and pleading, "Sir, open the door for us." But he will answer, "I don't know you or where you come from." What is the broad world path that leads to destruction? It refers to seeking worldly glory by making God the world that only thinks about the things of the earth and fills the belly of desires, ambitions, and lusts. If you live like this while saying that you believe in Jesus as your Lord, you are acting as an enemy of the cross of Christ. If you truly believe in Jesus and are saved, you should know that you have a citizenship in heaven. If you are a person who will go to heaven, you should pursue the things above while you are on earth. You should think of the things of this world as tools for the things above. However, you are living with the things of this world as your goal, using the things of heaven as tools, and thus you are living a life that goes against the cross that opens the gates of heaven. That is why the Bible tells us to kill the members of the body on earth. That is, to kill lust, which is fornication, uncleanness, covetousness, evil desires, and idolatry. There are those who were born from God, and those who were born from the devil in the world. Unfortunately, the devil's children, the descendants of the old serpent, are always in control of the institutional religion. They themselves are said to be blind, though they see. The whole world that does not belong to God is now in the hands of the evil one. So they try to drag as many people as possible into the dark world. It is also said that the door that leads to life is narrow, and the path is narrow, so few people seek it. Those who belong to the devil and the world live with the mindset of the world. Even if they appear to be living a church life, the core of their being is filled with the world. Why is it that even when they worship and listen to the word, they are constantly filled with the world? It is because they belong to the world. 1 John chapter 4:5, they are from the world, and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. It is because they are fundamentally of the world. How is the world going today? Humanism, evolutionism, and materialistic thinking without God are still in operation. The specter of Marxist communism still haunts the world, roaming around and capturing people's hearts, shouting for left-wing socialism. How is the world going today? The world is still dominated by the humanism, evolutionism, and materialism that have no God. First, the whole world is in the hands of the evil one. So the humanistic way of thinking without God is shaking the whole world. In today's text verse 19, it says, "We know that we are children of God, and that the whole world is under the control of the evil one." Although humans have become corrupt and fallen, and cannot have a correct perception because of the problem with the image of God, they naturally ask themselves fundamental questions because they are God's greatest creation. How did this universe and the world come into being? Also, what is human and who am I? Since human life is finite and ends in death, does everything end when we die? In other words, what center should humans live by to live right? Religion, ideology, and ideas are the answers to these questions. Confucius, who lived during the spring and autumn period, saw human problems as stemming from a lack of courtesy. He believed that the lack of courtesy between the king and his subjects led to endless coups. and that the lack of courtesy between parents and children, brothers and sisters, and neighbors led to the loss of peace in the human world. Therefore, Confucianism taught that restoring courtesy was the only way to free oneself from the suffering that humans face. In other words, the salvation that Confucianism speaks of is the restoration of courtesy. Therefore, Confucianism emphasizes the virtue of human relationships as a virtue of self-cultivation. That is essential for humans. But is solving our human problems a problem of etiquette? The Joseon dynasty was the time when Confucianism was made the state religion of the country. It was a time when the virtues of human relationships were highly emphasized. However, during the 500 years of the Joseon dynasty, our ancestors experienced the most division and internal strife. The dynasties of China, which followed the teachings of Confucius, were also marked by factions, fighting and bloody coups, just like any other country in the world. So human problems and world problems cannot be solved with the virtues of human relationships. However, Sakyamuni saw the problem of human suffering from a Hindu perspective. Hinduism began around 3000 BC. Hinduism was more of a lifestyle or philosophy than a religion. Hinduism has no founder, prophet, or doctrine. It is simply the religiousization of the lifestyle of fallen humans, who live with an interest in fertility and growth. In Hinduism, all the suffering, happiness, good, and evil that appear in the human world are seen as projections of truth that exist at the center of the universe, called Brahman. Within Brahman, there are no concepts of suffering, happiness, good, and evil. However, when it is projected onto the human world, humans feel the phenomena and events as suffering, happiness, good, evil, and so on. Therefore, such human emotions are all illusions. Therefore, the teaching is to not be fooled by such false feelings, but to realize that they are all illusions and unite them with Brahman. That is what is called Mu Nian Mu Sang. Around 600 BC, a reform movement arose in Hinduism, and a reform Hinduism emerged. One of them was Jainism, founded by a man named Mahavira, and the other was Buddhism, founded by Gautama Siddhartha. These two religions are reform Hinduism. Gautama Siddhartha founded Buddhism by eliminating sacrificial rites and the caste system from Hinduism. However, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism all have the same root. Humans must awaken to the truth and realize that everything is an illusion in order to escape the suffering they are in. In other words, the human salvation that Hinduism and Buddhism talk about is realizing that everything is an illusion. And the way to salvation and nirvana is karma through samsara and reincarnation. Karma is the repayment of bad deeds committed in a previous life in this life. They keep being reborn and repaying their karma one by one. That is how they eventually reach nirvana. However, if they become enlightened and awaken to the truth in the middle of this process, they will be freed from the cycle of samsara and attain paradise. Will the human problems be solved if everything in the world is an illusion? And if one reaches the level of enlightenment of no thought and no mind? Will humans be saved if they only realize that all the evil and suffering they experience are illusions? It sounds plausible, but it is self-escape that turns a blind eye to reality for one's own sake or as an illusion. However, realistically, many people pursue materialism and success, and think that human problems will be solved by doing so. The root of this kind of thinking is that the basis of everything is material. Therefore, they do not recognize things like transcendental realms and transcendental beings that are invisible. However, this material that we can see now has existed in some form for a long time. A long time ago, with the Big Bang of the universe, a chance single-celled life form came into existence and developed and evolved until today. And they expect that it will continue to evolve and finally utopia will be realized. However, they ridicule the idea that some transcendental being intervenes and helps, or that transcendental beings run history, as the blind faith of fools. And they say that humans have not yet been sufficiently educated and developed, and therefore have not yet been able to enjoy peace. Therefore, if we educate more, train more, and work more, utopia will surely come. The problem of suffering that humans face can be solved by human power. At the pinnacle of such naturalistic zeitgeist is the very important ideology of communist materialism. Second, the ideology of communism is a way of thinking that unfolds an unrealistic world of imagination and blindly believes that it is possible. The salvation of mankind through communism, which Marx dreamed of, means a society of complete equality ruled by the proletariat. The ideology of communism was advocated by Karl Marx, a German, in the mid-19th century. Karl Marx was a Jew, and he was born into a family of pastors of the German Lutheran Church. His grandfather was a Lutheran pastor and his father was a devout Christian. Karl Marx also studied theology and is famous for his thesis on the parable of the vine in John chapter 15, which he wrote while he was a seminarian. He was a genius philosopher and sociologist. He was most influenced by Hegel and Ludwig Feuerbach. That is why he was active in the Doctors' Club, a gathering of young Hegelians, while he was in college. Marx's dream of communism is a perfectly equal society ruled by the poor proletariat. However, such a world is impossible to realize in the real world. Why is that? It is because this world has fallen. It is impossible to make a fallen world into a perfect utopia through human efforts. Ironically, this is because the class struggle between capitalists and workers exists even in socialism and communism. Look at the socialist state of North Korea. If the capitalist is the boss and the worker is the subordinate in a capitalist country, then in a socialist country, the state is the boss and the people are the subordinate. This is because there is a ruling class and a subordinate class in any society. And humans have a tendency to want to be dictatorial once they have power. Therefore, whether it is the capitalist, the bourgeois, or the proletarian worker that Marx criticizes, the dictatorship of the proletariat is dictatorship. The dictatorship of the proletariat, which has seized both economic power and political power, is even more insidious. In a socialist country, the state is the boss, and the people are the subordinates. This is because there are always a ruling class and a subordinate class in any society. And once humans have power, they have a tendency to become dictatorial. The fact that the socialist proletarian dictatorship is more terrible and cruel than the capitalist bourgeois dictatorship, which only has economic power, is clearly demonstrated by the Soviet and North Korean communisms. So, Marx naively did not know the common sense of how evil human beings are. Just because he and his followers advocated the communist idea of equality for all people, they did not become angels when they seized power. Rather, because they were the oppressed, their nature of more brutally wielding power as humans, stubbornly pursuing material greed and oppressing dissidents was more intensely manifested. It is as if today's left-wing government is committing the in-your-face but not really like that contradiction of calling for the elimination of the legacy of corruption while committing even worse corruption. It is no exaggeration to say that the failure of Marxism ultimately stems from a lack of understanding of human nature. Marx was a hypocritical person. Marx was said to be violent, power-hungry, and caused trouble to those around him while living almost as a playboy. Yet, in his writings, he said that capitalists' exploitation of workers is the greatest evil. But he himself exploited his parents and relatives. It is said that he was indifferent to them on a regular basis, but when he needed money, he came to them for help. In other words, Marx was a man who led a comfortable life as a bourgeoisie with the money of his relatives. His wife died while taking care of Marx for the rest of her life, and she was uninterested in her daughter's education. Her 2 daughters ended their lives by committing suicide. He exploited his surroundings in this way. However, the last person he exploited was Helena Demuth, a maid who had devoted 45 years of her life to the family. She was a maid who was sent to her in-laws to take care of their wife, but Marx never gave her a single penny in her entire life. And he used her as a sex toy and even had an illegitimate child with her, but he did not recognize the child as his own, so he had to put her on the family register under the name Demas. The DNA of Marx's odd personality is a typical trait of most leftists. That is why there are many people who are unjustifiable in the height of contradictory hypocrisy. But the pathetic thing is that those influenced by Marx are launching a new Marxist movement, claiming liberation from cultural and social marginalization, oppression, and exploitation. There are too many people who claim to be neo-Marxists and have the DNA of Marx's dual, hypocritical, and bizarre personality. Friedrich Nietzsche laid the foundation for neo-Marxism by saying, "Prohibit everything that is forbidden," even as he was dying under the care of his devout mother and sister, and described Christians as the most low-class and animalistic humans. Wilhelm Reich, who advocated sexual liberation, saw his own adulterous mother and tattled on her to her father, causing him to die of depression. This may have been a grudge, but he advocated unlimited sexual liberation while opposing Christianity, which had wrongly defined adultery as a sin. These parental children are cleverly packaging various sexual perversions, including homosexuality, as Marxism, existentialist philosophy, and Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, which liberate the oppressed, and are calling for their legalization under the guise of sexual politics. So, those who have been enjoying various perverse desires in the shadows are now trying to become beasts and enjoy themselves in the light. Which is the new Marxism and the sexual sex political revolution. Neo-Marxism is nothing more than a fall into the abyss of obscenity and debauchery when the economy flourished and grew belly full due to Christianity. When humans get full, the next thing they seek is idolatry and obscenity. Neo-Marxism extends economic inequality and class struggle between capitalists and workers, men and women, and sexual deviants and sexual normals to the realm of race and religion by labeling them as minorities and majorities. New Marxism packs homosexuals and various sexual perverts under the nice-sounding term of sexual minorities, and claims that they should be guaranteed their human rights and equal rights as well. North Korea's existence has made South Korea a complex society where old Marxism and new Marxism coexist, with the former leading to the corruption of sexual ethics due to economic prosperity. The reason why neo-Marxism is so serious is that it tries to legislate its claims under the name of comprehensive anti-discrimination, blocking criticism and influence from other humans and turning normal people into potential criminals. It is trying to make the world go completely crazy. Third, the leftists who create evil and obscene culture are becoming more and more powerful because the world is in the hands of evil people. The distorted materialist thinking sees the world in a distorted way and makes people wander in a frame that leads to division and destruction. Feminism that claims to be feminist is like this. Feminism originally focused on women's suffrage and equal enjoyment of legal rights with men. However, the second generation of feminism, which began in the 1970s, advocated a women's liberation movement against all forms of male patriarchy. They viewed the family system as the foundation of patriarchy, idealized working women, and denigrated housewives and motherhood. Gloria Steinem, a prominent advocate and publisher of Ms. Magazine, portrays herself as a self-sacrificing humanitarian, but in reality she hung out with the upper class, aristocrats, and celebrities. She claims that women don't need men the way fish don't need bicycles, but she was always seen at lavish parties with men on her arm. It was a hypocritical act like the Gangnam left, the Champagne left, and the Cadillac left. Third-wave feminism, which claims that masculinity and femininity are social constructs rather than intrinsic natures, transforms into gender studies. They deny the biological distinction between men and women, which God established, and advocate for a social and subjective gender, advocating for more than 50 genders, including intersex and asexuality, as well as male and female. The gender equality promoted by the left-wing government is not about the gender equality of men and women, but about recognizing more than 50 subjective gender identities. Feminists define men as oppressors and women as the oppressed from the perspective of Marx's class struggle, and argue that since the existing culture has been male-centered and oppressive, all existing cultural and social norms must be overturned by the gender equality movement. North Korean left-wingers dominate South Korean elementary, middle, and high schools. Many of the superintendents are from the Korean Teachers Union. The education advocated by the Korean Teachers Union is true education. Feminists define men as oppressors and women as the oppressed from the perspective of Marx's class struggle, and argue that since the existing culture is male-centered and oppressive, all existing cultural and social norms must be overturned by the gender equality movement. Korean elementary, middle, and high schools are dominated by the left-wing pro-North Korea. Many of the education superintendents are from the Korean Teachers Union. True education is education that teaches the Kim Il-sung Juche ideology. Therefore, the distortion of history textbooks in schools is also serious. According to them, South Korea is a country that should not have been born, and North Korea is a country that has inherited the legitimacy of the Korean people. They say that Lee Sung-man, the founding president, and Park Chung-hee, the economic president, were failed dictators, and that Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, who were pro-North Korea and pro-North Korean, were the true presidents of South Korea. Jeon Tae-yeol, who committed suicide by self-immolation, is praised as a workers' hero with a photo. But there is no record of Chung Ju-young or Lee Byung-chul, the leaders of the Korean economic construction. They are mistaken that if only the workers are well off, people will live well and the country will become strong. They are talking about workers without capitalists. That is why they are called hypocrites and a mass of contradictions. However, universities in Europe and the United States are even worse. About 80% of the professors at leading universities in the United States are left-wing, and less than 10% are right-wing. It is said that the leftists are so aggressive that if you express your right-wing views at a university, you will be threatened with your job and excluded from the allocation of research funds for professors. According to a 2001 survey, the tendency of freshmen at universities was 29.9% left-wing and 20.7% right-wing, with only a 10% difference. But the tendency of graduates was more than 50% left-wing and right-wing. This is no coincidence. This is because most American universities teach Marxist economics and neo-Marxist ideas in liberal arts classes. Marxist leftists also dominate the media today. Most of the terrestrial and cable TV channels in Korea are controlled by the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions. They have a significant influence on broadcasting. The same is true of the American media. CNN, NYT New York Times, WP Washington Post, LA Times, ABC, CBS, and NBC, which are familiar to us, are all left-wing media. And they are not fair and they report biased. So, right-wing citizens in the United States are getting fair information through right-wing media on YouTube rather than mainstream media. For your information, Fox News and the Wall Street Journal are right-wing media in the United States. Also, like in South Korea, the media, education, and arts sectors in Europe and the United States, as well as the core elites of the EU administration and the UN, are all neo-Marxists. While conservative churches and the conservative right are preoccupied with the quantitative growth of churches and individual success, neo-Marxists are taking control of the financial, educational, and media sectors and are now flooding the entire world with the red waters of the left. In addition, the leftists recognize Muslims as a religion of peace and the oppressed. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from the perspective of the Marxist left. Muslims are the most far right from Muslims allow polygamy, execute homosexuals, and do not hesitate to commit honor killings if a woman commits adultery. Why are leftists friendly to Muslims? It is because Muslims have cultivated many pro-Muslim forces on the left when the oil boom was going well. Many scholars, the UN, and Western leftists are actively in tune with the Muslims' financial offensive. The left accuses male-centric patriarchs, sexists, and fascist racists. But says that if Muslims do so, they should turn a blind eye to their claims because of the internal approach. Why do they do this? It is because they have a common enemy in capitalism and the overthrow of Christianity. Ultimately, the world is trying to go down the path of becoming Islamic. That is why the Antichrist is likely to be connected to Islamic forces during the Great Tribulation. Today, the world is being influenced by the idols of materialist leftist ideology. Some people in the church mistakenly believe that they have become an awakened citizen if they have leftist thinking. This is because they do not have a proper understanding of the left. In verse 21, it says, "Dear children, keep yourselves from idols." As God's people, we must not be fooled into joining or falling into a world that is building a Babel without God. Rather, may you fulfill the mission of saving the lives of those who can be saved in the midst of them in the name of the Lord.